Hello and welcome to This Week in Gwent. And we have a returning guest, Jean.
Hey, hey.
It feels like we just recorded something, right? It feels like I've been seeing you a lot lately.
I was going to say not long time no see, but it doesn't really feel like it.
I agree. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. What about you, man?
I am good. You know, enjoying the sun being out finally and the weather getting a lot better. So that's for sure a plus. When it comes to everything pluses, we have a patch dropping very, very soon, which is May 10th. And patch notes will come on Monday together with a developer video. So 2 things happening on Monday, and on Tuesday, you will have the juicy, beautiful patch. And with it, we're also having journeys come back, but more about those things when it comes to balance changes, as well as what's going to happen in Journey and how it's different from the previous ones that we had. You'll be able to get all that information from a video that will drop on Monday. So yeah, highly encourage you to check that out. And so without further ado, we'll go through the red news and the community news, and then we'll talk to Jean about balance, because there was a lot of questions about balance. So also, people in chat, if you have any questions for Jean when it comes to balance related stuff, feel free to drop them. We might choose a couple and answer them. Apart from that, I have a couple of questions which were asked numerous times on the Flurza podcast, but we don't talk about balance there. So yeah. There's already a question for you, which I don't want us to miss. What is your hair care routine?
Not good enough.
Not good
is the answer.
Oh.
Yeah, I need to take more care of them.
But is it shampoo and conditioner or just shampoo?
Yeah, shampoo and conditioner. Like, I try to do it only one time a week. Usually it's one time every 5 days.
Respect. Yeah, then it's you're known for your magnificent hair, right? Next question is about Ring of Favor, but I don't know. Yeah, just wait for that. You need to kind of get all that information soonish, which is more around Monday-ish. So
yeah, let's not spoil it.
So no spoilers here. No spoilers. So yeah. People want to know about the bicycles behind me, but I will talk about them later. I will actually first talk about kind of what has been going on in the world of Gwent throughout this week, and Jean will help me, of course. We have the last days of the current journey, so it's the Dandelion journey. So with the update coming on May 10th, we will have this journey rotate out, and Geralt and Ciri will be back. So it's your last chance to get the cool stuff. So highly encourage you to do so. We also have a design article number 2 about balancing.
I wonder who wrote it.
Wow, yeah. Jean actually wrote it. So highly encourage you to check it out. I actually read through the whole thing, and my attention span is not very long, but I managed to go through it yesterday before bed. Really, really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. I also learned some stuff from it, to be honest. Like, I didn't know what the short meta thing, the acronym was, that most efficient tactics available. I never thought about that. I mean, it's so obvious. It's
No. It's a retronym. It's the opposite. People think it means that, but no, it's a word that comes from the Greek.
Damn. Yeah. So yeah. Oh yeah. Beyond metagame interactions. Yes.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was really cool. I see you also put a lot of like. I really like also the comparisons. There was a little bit of StarCraft there. Stuff about OpenAI and stuff like that, and then it circled back to Gwent, and there was a lot of like really cool stuff. So kudos to you. Hopefully we can get this series going, like, more and more of these articles. I know you're a busy man, but looks like you're pretty, you like doing this, so it's
definitely.
It's good. Yeah,
it's
there's
fun to share.
Since there's a very important question in chat. Will Pavko Gale get a buff?
You'd like that, wouldn't you?
No, I didn't ask about it. It was someone,
right?
Someone from. I have it right here. Michael Loda. Balanced question. Will Pavko Gale get a buff? So yeah. No leaks. Oh,
no
Sean.
Comment.
Oh, come on. You just should say, yes, he will get a solid buff, because he can be removed by anything in the game right now. So
wow.
Yeah, and yeah. No comment. Okay, I'll take it if you don't want to spoil anything. But hopefully, my petition still stands for the whole balance team. Like, Pavko Gale needs a buff. Moving on, we had May the 4th. May the 4th be with you this week. Are you a Star Wars fan, Jean?
I'm gonna say something that's gonna get me much hate. I mostly enjoyed the second trilogy.
Oh,
it's like the prelogy.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know, it's terrible, because the part I really enjoyed about it was the world building they were doing. Mm-hmm. Like, it felt like a much wider universe, much more depthful.
Yeah.
Well, it stays quite superficial, right? Because like I like, political thrillers and this kind of stuff, and well, the politics of the trilogy isn't that great, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely like this idea of, it feels like there's all of these societies and everything. That's the kind of stuff I'm really interested in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the prequels are still okay-ish. Whatever happens after the original trilogy, pretty much, Not a big fan. Not a big fan. But that's my opinion, of course. So yeah. So we got those out of the way. Like I said, everything related to the upcoming update is going to happen on Monday. Patch notes and video for those that joined it late. On the community news site, we have a couple of things going on. First of all, Gwentfinity. So you think you know The Witcher. New episodes are going to drop starting on Monday the 9th. And they have a stacked lineup because they have Vlad, Thea, Dog, and Chaotic Neutral Goblin, who is a cosplayer. Awesome. Four people. Yeah, and Dog himself. That's going to be amazing because he can do the voice. He can do the voice. So that is something that I'm really excited for. I also had the possibility to be on the Path, the Witcher podcast. I know it's not Gwent related, but we were talking about like the first two quests that you do in Witcher 3 when you get to Novigrad. So yeah, pretty cool to discuss those. I had to actually remind myself what those were and go through them once again. But it's really, really cool. Highly encourage you to check out the banter. So yeah. And Team Krev League Season 5 is launching once again for those of you that are into esports and stuff like that. So you can join now. Yeah, there's regular season, which lasts 7 weeks, and there's playoffs for 3 weeks, and that's still to be announced. But everything is starting on the 17th of May. So yeah, check it out. And we also have these awesome Gwent calendars for your smartphone by Claymore. So highly encourage you to go on Reddit, download them. I think they're also on Twitter. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Yeah. Yes, Vlad, I know this is the art here of Gordur Gaved, if I pronounced that properly, probably not. Yeah. The one here has the snake on the one of the pillars, which is of course high fantasy and shouldn't be there. I agree. Vlad said I'd allow it. I don't know. We have to run that by the lore police. Okay. Yep. So those are the news from the community and also from us. We wanted to sit down and talk a little bit about balance. Like, we won't probably get into everything related to Forgotten Treasures and kind of the current state of the meta and the changes that we plan, because those are things that we will highlight in the video, which is dropping on Monday. But I wanted to ask you some questions that I saw from the community. These are mainly the ones that came up for Flurza. So the first one is about devotion. Are there any plans for devotion? Right now, it seems impossible for it to compete in the meta.
Okay, so devotion is a pretty tough nut to crack because it has some unwanted effects, basically. So in the past, what we've seen when there was Master Mirror, for instance, is that there were a lot of decks. Like, the point of devotion is to avoid choice, right? It's to say either run me with devotion or don't, and then get access to some interesting neutrals. Or maybe we do it because we don't want you to get access to specific neutrals. And what we would see is that more often than not, people were settling. Were either saying, okay, I'm running this deck devotion because, well, the cost of doing so isn't that big in the first place. Or I'm not doing it because what I'm getting from it is just not interesting. Damn, I don't know how to evolve from this. But yeah, basically we have a bunch of problems with devotion. It's an interesting mechanic, and it is something we don't want to drop. It's something we want to come back to. But finding the proper way to do it is hard. And like, I'm trying to think of examples. But for instance, basically, if we want to introduce new devotion cards, either we have to do it to decks that are not already played with their devotion cards, or we have to do it to new archetypes. And the reason behind this is because if we introduce a devotion card to a deck that is already being played with devotion, there's pretty much no point.
Yeah.
Because that deck is not going to change his mind on if it's going to run devotion or not. And yeah, basically it's quite hard to create these dilemmas.
Yeah. I think I fully understand that. Next question is 7 for 4 seems to be the rule for all new 4-point cards. So why not buff all the old 4-point cards to match? Why not just why just not,
Oh no.
buff them all? I know
So
it's impossible, right? It's impossible to take everything and do it at once, right?
No, it is possible. But it's not interesting. Like it's easy to talk about like an extreme example. So if you take Peasant Militia, right? 2 points, boost self by 2, 4 provision, neutral. It is a terrible card.
Yeah, it's not good.
So you want to buff it. Where do you put it? If you're only touching numbers. So you could put it at 7 for 4, right? So you boost the power to 5 and you let the boost at 2, so that's 7 points. The problem with it, actually, before I'm answering this, 7 for 4 is with a condition. That's something very big, right? Usually we don't really have 7 for 4s that you can just run anywhere. And so the reason you might run a 7 for 4 is because you are able to generate this value, because in the specific day that you're playing, this card is worth this. It might not be worth the same thing in all decks. And that's very important because otherwise the card would be everywhere. So if we take a card like Peasant Militia and we make it 7 for 4, well, you might start to be inclined to play it everywhere, which is not what we want to do. But if we make it a 6 for 4, you just never want to play that card.
Yeah.
And if we make it 8 for 4, then it's just absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
So for a lot of these cards, touching the power and the provision doesn't necessarily achieve something. Because if we don't want them to be everywhere, the cards are probably nowhere. And what we're doing more and more is that whenever we're thinking of buffing a card, we're thinking, why are we doing it? So basically, there's no point to just making a random buff if we don't expect to achieve something. And so we try to achieve stuff. Say, oh, we want to make this archetype good, so we're going to focus on these cards so that we know it's going to achieve something. Whereas if we were just to randomly buff them, it might not have an impact to begin with, but also it might make players less interested in trying them out. It's what I've developed in the article, that it's important to bulk release these buff changes because small changes may not be considered. And like another problem is you might have a card that is bad, but that belongs to an archetype that is good. In which case you don't necessarily want to buff it, because what you're truly doing is that you're making an archetype that is already good potentially better. And that also comes a lot into the decision of when we are doing stuff and why we're doing things. And so like, yeah, it's an argument I see a lot, right? Like they should just go through old cards and just make power and provision changes. I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it would be really interesting if we were to do so.
I think everybody just wants engine cards and high, and good stuff. And I feel there was also this comment in chat said that, some cards in a card game just simply will be worse, and it's fine, right? It doesn't have to be, they don't have to be all of them, fine tuned to 100%, right?
Yeah. My personal philosophy toward this is that I aim for this absolutely ideal state of stuff where everything has a point, everything has a purpose. And the big way to achieve that is through conditions, and is through saying, okay, so this card is worth a bunch of points, but only in a specific scenario. So like this deck might be interested in it, but only this deck. Because otherwise, if you make generic cards, it tends to erase everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It is the problem with mid-range stuff.
No.
And yeah, at the moment, a card like Pigeon Militia, Wolfpack, these are cards that don't exist because you'd never see them played. You're never gonna play them, and that's not good.
Yeah.
But the road to making them into cards that might be worthwhile is not as simple as just increasing the power and provision.
Yeah, you can do that, and still like they might be bad, right? Because the effect on them is like, right, and that doesn't change anything. That's why I think the big focus put on for this year was to kind of also look into cards and actually change their abilities in order to make them once again competitive, right?
Yeah, my perspective is that if we were to buff Pigeon Militia by 2 points, it's a wasted buff. As in, sure, it doesn't cost us much time to do it, but it's also not achieving anything. And I would much rather wait for the proper time for it to actually achieve something.
Mm-hmm. There was also a question why we sometimes wait with addressing cards, which of course, like this is a question that always comes up, but some people like think that cards, let's say Ring of Favor and Priestess, for example, that they should be instantly hotfixed because they're overperforming. Why do we always wait a little bit longer? Like I pretty much know the answer, but I feel like it needs to be like addressed multiple times so people understand why this is actually happening.
So usually because it's never that simple. So the first thing, so for instance, you take Ring of Favor, the fact that it's in a lot of different places and that it's behaving strongly did not necessarily came apparent very quickly. As in, players were trying things out, and it took time for them to start really, like, every deck wanting to play around this card. Then you have the opposite, which is cards like Traveling Priestess, where it performed quite strongly from the get-go, but also it went down. I mean, I'm not saying the card is bad, right? It is decent, definitely, it is strong, but it is way lower in terms of, for instance, performances than what we could see at the very beginning. And typically what happened there is that it was a deck that was easy to figure out, and that players didn't necessarily know to play against. And so over the first few days, the cards settled into a state that was much more honest. So the reason why we don't act immediately is usually because we can't. Because there's just not enough information, because also we need to give time to stuff. We don't want to take away the fact that players discover the game. And like in the past, we've acted on a few stuff. There was, of course, I forgot his name. Radovid? Was it Radovid that we released at the same time of Milva?
I think so. If
so
you mean Milva Sharpshooter, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
But the combo between Radovid and Uprising, that was something where we had to consider, okay, is this too much? And we ended up saying, okay, yeah, it is too much, so let's patch it. But you could see a different scenario where it would be, maybe players are going to adapt to it, so maybe we should not touch it. Because when you address something that quickly, you also tend to be quite destructive in the way you do it. And you have to remember that for every player that doesn't like something that they're playing against, there's probably someone that enjoys playing it. And so these destructive actions, they're not as simple as, okay, this is gonna make the game better, because when you take this destructive action, you're also making the life of someone worse.
Yeah, I think it's also like, I feel like we as a card game are pretty much addressing everything on a monthly basis, which for me is quick, because I also come from different card games in which, in order for something to get banned or changed, it takes a couple months at least. It's not something that is instantaneous. And I think 1 month is very quick. But I also agree with the statement that a lot of players are able to like work around these decks, right? Once the meta develops and things are actually changing in it, they learn how to play around them, or maybe they take in some cards which are just simple answers to what is being played, and they're able to still come out on top, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool stuff. There's a lot of questions about Erendite. Do you want to talk about Erendite overall, or you don't?
I don't know what
people say that it's simply a card that relies only on coin flip, right? That it's coin flip based, which I don't know if I agree on.
I'm probably not the best person to talk about Erendite. I definitely don't think that it's as polarized as people make it out to be.
Agreed.
I mean, definitely, you do have an advantage when you're on one side rather than the other. But as to how problematic it is for the game, I don't consider it. Yeah, I don't really buy that narrative as of now.
Same. I think also, like, playing against it, it's not what people make it out to be. To be honest, I feel like there's other things that need kind of our attention more than Erendite in this case, and I feel like Erendite, for me at least, is pretty much fair when it comes to playing that card or playing against it. Okay, moving on. When will CDPR introduce more for provisions, of course, meta-defining cards like the Priestess, asking for a friend? Asking for a friend.
We already did, right? Like, I mean, not necessarily 4 provisions, but bronzes in general, which are considered meta-defining. I feel like we did a lot. I mean, previously somehow it always falls on an R, but previously there's been Meditating Mage. We've heard about like Messengers of the Sea, cards like this.
I think it's been a constant thing, right?
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily plan for it, but I'm not sure. Like, I think cards like this are kind of bound to keep appearing, but also I don't consider them to be any problem. Like, so for instance, when you look at the narrative around a card like Traveling Priestess, players talk about it as if it's this card that single-handedly generates 30 points. The truth is, you have to play a lot of cards to support it around it. And the value, like these 30 points, they're not Traveling Priestess points. They're all of these previous cards that you played, which invested into Traveling Priestess, that's the way you generated points. You have to play like Pincer Maneuver, which, well, if you're only looking at the raw points that Pincer Maneuver is giving you, that's like 4 or something. So these points are like, if you're playing it, it means there must be points somewhere else, and these points there are going into Traveling Priestess. And so to me, these bronze defining cards in terms of game plan, they are not very different from gold ones in terms of how your deck ends up being. Still have to like completely build around it. It's just the value is being put in different places. And in fact, something we've noticed as of late is, when is the last time you've heard just draw your gold? Because I haven't been hearing that one in a while.
Yeah, that's true.
And for me, this is a direct consequence of making bronzes, well, first of all, stronger, right? Like raising what we've done in some time now, which is raising that line, that power curve of these bronze card, but also just in general making them feel more impactful to your game plan, making you feel like you actually want to be running bronzes. And I feel like this came a very long way to improving the sentiment there is behind the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Any thoughts on changing / improving Draco Turtle? Seems like it should be a cool legendary for armor stacking, but it has no synergy with the Onslaught Pirate / ship package.
I don't really see the card in the same way. To me, it's a card that is more for self-wound, because it's like you don't really want to have a lot of armor on Draco Turtle. It's the opposite. You want to take it away, right?
As less as possible.
And in fact, when we were working on improving self-wound, obviously we were looking at like self-wound payoffs, one of them being cards like Olaf, Champion of Svalbard,
Mm-hmm.
And there was Draco Turtle. And we didn't touch it at all because the card was actually already played in Alchemy, where it was basically being used as a target for Myrdrum. I'm not pronouncing it right.
Myrdrum or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was generating a lot of points there. In fact, it's still kind of played, though it has slightly fallen out of flavor. So yeah, the answer is for now not really, because the card already has a niche.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not much point to, removing it from that niche only to put it somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And also I think if we made it like a armor, stack card, I don't know. Like it would change what the card actually is, and I don't think it would. I don't see it, but maybe I'm not that big of a Skellige player in order to define if this was better in any way.
Maybe someday we'll come back to it and figure out that we need to change something because the card doesn't see play in a long time. But as for now, it seems like it still have a niche. So yeah.
Cool. There is a question which was asked on Flurza, and I kind of answered with the help of Maleesian. But it would be nice to kind of get your take on it. So someone was curious about the implementation process of new cards / sets and how it kind of works. Do you typically start by analyzing current strengths and weaknesses of a card and try to plug any holes? Or does the process tend to be more organic, a mix of both, perhaps? So what's your... If you would have to explain it to the random Joe, let's say, what's the process?
Definitely both.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's a mix behind, what we feel like which archetype we can develop in a faction. So by can, I mean an archetype that is not already good, because there's no point to making something that's good already even better, right?
Yeah.
So figuring out what we can touch, how we can touch it, that's very big part. And then also what makes sense in terms of theme that we want to play with, I don't know, part of the lore that we want to address. And all of these kind of become a mix and ends up kind of defining what we're aiming for the expansion. And from that point, it tends to be a bit of a tough process when you're still there, because you don't always know the concrete direction that you're trying to go in. And once you have one or two designs, that's when the other designs has to be easier, because then you can have cards respond to one another. So it's a bit of a mix of we're trying to just get inspiration in general and just think of an idea that is exciting, that is cool to play with, and sometime going back to kind of this raw analysis of like, okay, so this archetype is struggling on this, on this, on this. It can be a source of inspiration. A good example of this was how is he called? The Syndicate Pope.
The
I'm
Syndicate
terrible
Pope?
with lore.
Hemofart?
Yes, Hemofalt. So Hemofalt was a direct result of this kind of work, where at the time we were like looking at Syndicate Firesworn, and we realized, okay, so there's this super combo heavy deck that relies on these key bronze species, and it can have a tough time if these species are not available, like they're killed, answered. And they also have a problem, like they don't have that many ways to spend coins, and they have trouble with space, and all of these different points basically were a source of inspiration for MFOT, where we're like, okay, so it could be a card that allows you to get back your engines, that allows you to spend some coin for it, and by banishing tokens to replace them with like better Firesworn, at least you're not competing for space.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for the insight about the implementation. It's pretty much one of the things that kind of keep on coming back from the community in terms of questions. It was also kind of something that Malegian said, that it all kind of starts with what you want to achieve, like if there's an overall theme or mechanic that you want to work on, and then from that it kind of goes through like brainstorming and then actually testing it within a bigger card pool and seeing if it actually in that card pool if it actually works, and then doing multiple iterations and then kind of seeing and then actually going back and seeing if it actually works after those iterations, right? So it's a long process, to be honest, because it's a lot of testing and going back and forth in order for this to work properly. Okay. A few years ago, we had leader abilities like Mystic Echo, Second Wind, and a few others that allowed players to play 2 cards per 1 turn. Are there any plans, those leaders, to return being reworked, of course, like Pincer Maneuver, for example?
They have already been reworked.
Yeah.
There might be a slight misunderstanding because, for instance, let's take Mystic Echo. So it was changed in 7.2.
Yeah.
And because the ability was scrapped and completely reworked, the name was also changed. And now it's Nature's Gift. And for all of these leader abilities, it's been the case. So, like, we didn't waste any slots, right? So I don't think the name would come back. Like,
but
if it
the
would,
ability
it would
is
be
kind of redone, changed, and given a different name in this case, right?
Yeah. So, like, I don't think the name would come back, or maybe if we got an idea that was close to it. As for the actual part of the ability, the reason all of these were reworked was to prevent playing multiple cards in the same turn. As in, obviously, that's something you can do when you're tutoring, right? It allows you to chain up cards. But basically, this leader ability allows for super broad setup of playing 2 cards in the same turn, which could be used to trigger a scenario immediately, for instance. This kind of stuff. And well, I wasn't actually in the design team at the time, but I joined them right after, and it was a decision that was motivated by the fact that it felt like the environment had become way too combo centric. And so changes needed to be made, and we figured out that this kind of stuff should not be allowed.
Yeah, and of course, I still haven't seen it in chat, but I was just waiting for people to compare it to Golden Necker, and I think it's different in this case, right?
It definitely was one of the concerns with the Golden Necker, right? Like, a card that allows you to play so many cards in a single turn, obviously that opens them up setup. But in the case of Golden Necker, it was balanced out from, like, one part is that it's random. So it turns out that doing these kind of setups is either unreliable or it requires so much preparation beforehand that it's fine.
Yeah, like you would need to use Maxi before to kind of see like what's.
Yeah, like ideally you would need to thin your deck to like 3 cards so that you have the exact ordering of. It was too complicated to do. And the other reason is because there's already a condition on top of it that it's restricted to 9Ps, where the type of combos that you can do is also weaker. Like the kind of worst offenders of these old leader abilities were your super high hand cards, right? That you would like play to get massive point slams.
Yeah, exactly. Last question that I have from here. There might be more in chat later on. I'll have a look. But what do you think about the number of cards in a deck from a game design perspective? Today, it makes sense to have more than 25 cards, but back in beta, there was available 40 cards in our deck. I think there was a Foltest deck. We kind of talked about this with Flake also, but we had our kind of own view on it. Do you think that the 25 card limit should be in the future something like 25 plus card archetype? And I feel like in Gwent, more than 25, and in any card game, you want your deck to be as streamlined as possible, right? And the more cards, the worse in this case.
So in Gwent, it's even worse because the fact that you're running more cards doesn't mean you're getting more provision. So you're extra punished in Gwent by running more cards because you're really spreading out your provision even more. Honestly, the idea behind a 25 plus condition, so like let's say Golden Necker, but the condition is you have 30 cards in your deck. That's something that could happen, but we would need to think about how we want to develop it, and also if it's interesting to play, because I think a lot of players might find it frustrating because you just end up running much more 4 provisions card that might break you, right?
Yeah. Maybe people want this as like a mill counter because they don't want to be milled because there's a lot of cards that they can use. But like back in the day with the Foltest deck, it made sense because there was a lot of cards that would muster each other, so you would still kind of thin, and actually having more cards would make sense in that in that pretty much meta. But here I feel like it doesn't really make any sense right now.
And then you have the counter argument, like the opposite argument, which is to say, well, if there isn't any point to having more than 25 cards in the deck, why not just put the row restrictions on it? And it's actually an argument that is valid for a lot of different card games. In fact, some card games have decided to roll with it. Hearthstone limits you to 30 cards, right? I don't think you can run any other number. And there are opposite arguments to this. So, for instance, in Gwent, not that long ago, we got Enslave 7. Okay, it might not be the most competitive deck, but I think allowing this kind of stuff to exist is important.
I agree.
Something that was really interesting in reading about is that in the recent years, in the Yu-Gi-Oh meta, so in Yu-Gi-Oh they have a 40 cards limit. So obviously you only want to run 30 cards because, like in every other card game, you won't draw your good cards. And they started running 50 cards deck. This kind of stuff. And the reasoning was that in Yu-Gi-Oh, there are certain cards that you don't want to be drawing. But you need it. You need to run it. It needs to be in your deck. So you want one copy and you don't want to draw it. So in response to this, they started increasing the number of cards they run so that they would not find these type of cards as much. And they would fill the hole with like running more tech cards, like more tools, which usually they don't have the space to run. And obviously this has counterplay because, well, sure, you're not finding these best cards as often, but you're also not finding your good cards as often.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting example that like the meta developed in this state where it's actually desirable in some cases to have more than 40 cards.
Yeah, and I agree with this. Sometimes if you build your deck around like let's say some combo pieces, and there are cards that let you play other cards from your deck, like you don't really want to draw into them, or you don't want multiple copies of something because it will just, it will ruin like your whole game plan. So it makes total sense. There was a question about the balance team overall. Do you guys, apart from working on the multiplayer balance, do you also work on other things like Golden Necker and draft and all that stuff?
Oh god, I don't know how much I can say.
I mean, you can say what's the truth. I mean, this is like just saying that yes, there is a big balance team, and some people work on the single player, and some work on the multiplayer, right?
Yeah, so there's a wider terms of balance team, and like I'm in the part that works on the multiplayer, and there's a part that works on the single player, and on the Golden Necker, and we used to be more mixed and work on both. And kind of ever since I arrived, we've been slowly splitting up more because it just made more sense for people to be able to focus on their own projects. As for draft, it's mostly the responsibility of another team, I believe. Though sometimes we're asked for opinions and whatnot.
Yeah.
But to be honest, multiplayer takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
because
of course it does.
well, it's it's design, but it's also
planning new cards, right?
Yeah, so we have to plan for future content. We have to actually design it. We have to handle balancing, right, which requires to be looking at the game at kind of all time. These balance discussions take a lot of time too. Then the cards have to be tested. And in fact, the cards have to be implemented. And it turns out that in GWENT, most of the implementation of the cards is handled by the designers. So we have like small boxes that we connect so that to say, oh, okay, the sec target and damage it by 3. This is fun to do, but it takes time too.
Yeah, just actually implementing that into it so it works in the game is a time-consuming process, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I saw
obviously not as time-consuming as just changing one number, but yeah.
Yeah, and also remember the first time I saw like one of the designers working on this and kind of seeing this like boxes that are connected with each other. I'm like, what are you doing? Are you like planning a quest or something? Because I've seen like quests also being done the same in The Witcher 3. If you use this dialogue option, you get this. If you do this, you get this dialogue option, and kind of creates this like nice grid with everything connected. And this is the same for planning the logic in terms of like what's going to happen when you play a card, right?
In fact, we have a super good system. Like props to our programmers on this because I love working with it, and I cannot say as much for every project that I've worked on in the past. But yeah, it's a super cool system. For people that know a bit more about this kind of stuff, it's called visual programming or Nodal. If you take a look at Unreal Engine 4 blueprint system, it's basically very close to this kind of stuff. So boxes that you connect in terms of when they will trigger, and then you connect variables, and everything is visual and super quick to prototype. It's a really cool thing. Yeah,
fully agreed. There was, of course, another question about Pafko Gale and when he's getting a buff. I did not make this up. This was actually in chat. There's also a question, do you know anything about premium tokens?
Okay.
I love that reaction. Are they coming or not?
It's like
this has just become a meme. That's why everybody asks about premium tokens, and we always make fun of it.
I mean, some players will get that reference. Do you see the placeholder cards that Artifact did for its rework, maybe?
Yeah.
So they looked like cards that were made on paint. My skills are lower than this. So I can get you premium tokens. Just be careful what you wish for.
No, I think that people would actually enjoy if we made like alternative versions of tokens, which are just done in MS Paint, and people would still totally love that. Like totally, because it would just become a meme of itself, and people just love memes. Second question is about Dagon.
Yes.
Do you know if that Dagon or Dagon is if he coming back? Yes or no?
No comment.
Haha, good. Okay, a serious question from Devil Driven, who's awesome. Will the team ever print new scenarios? Have you thought about having more scenarios within Gwent?
Actually, first of all, I want to say, because when I was aiming at joining the Gwent design team, I was consuming content from different person to try to, get more and more and more accustomed back, because I used to play it times before. And the concept of Devil Driven was part of the videos I was looking for.
That's awesome.
So yeah. And obviously I forgot the question, so please once again.
So do you plan to have more scenarios in the game, or do you want to add more scenarios to the game?
No comment.
Dum, dum, dum. Okay. Do you feel positioning should matter more in Gwent?
That's a really tough one. We're trying to a degree. But it is something where it's hard to draw depth from it. Like, okay, so first of all, because there's different flavors of positioning. For instance, the simplest flavor is melee versus ranged. And we've been printing a lot less of these roll-locked abilities. And, well, that means less depth, right? It also means less complexity, because when you have an ability that works only on one row and there isn't really any good reason for it, it's not always super intuitive. In terms of UX, it doesn't necessarily always feel super good. So it's something that we keep doing when there's a point. So, like, for instance, a good example of this is Leapy. There are situations where you might not want to put your entire deck in your graveyard. Yeah. In which case, being able to play it on a row where its ability is not going to trigger is super useful. So in these kind of cases, we roll lock stuff, but we haven't really done it for just regular abilities. And obviously, it means you can be way less punished for getting one of your row blocked. So this is something tough. And then you have more specific positioning, where it's like what your card is adjacent to, where exactly it is on the board. And the problem is that it can be quite matchup dependent. If you face like movement, or maybe Nilfgaard is putting spies and breaking your synergies, that can be pretty tough for you. But at the same time, it's cool being a bit more mindful about card placement. It's cool when card placement matters. So yeah, the short answer is it is definitely something that's on our minds, something that we wish to develop more. We don't necessarily have perfect answer to it, though.
Okay. Yeah, I think that answers the questions. Do you know if any new keywords are coming to Gwent?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a good answer.
But like, okay, a keyword can mean a new mechanic. Sometimes it can also mean that existing mechanic are streamlined into a keyword, because it just allows us to solve specific cases, because it makes card more readable. Yeah.
Okay. What about new stratagems? Do you think we'll get anything on that front?
I think on that front is kind of unlikely. I mean, I think, like, personally, something I could see myself do. Like, I be like, oh, you know what? It would be cool if we were to do new stratagems. But I'm actually not sure it's a good thing. Basically, it's really hard to create depth from stratagems. And the reason behind this is kind of what I was talking about when I was talking about 7 and 4s. So you take tactical advantage. It's a 5-power stratagem, and it will basically always give you 5 points.
Yeah.
Right. You also have the magic lamp. Same thing. You always get 5 points. So why would you run another stratagem? Well, you're only running it if you can expect to, on average, get more points from it. Which is complex. Because if we're allowing you to have that, then you're probably only going to be running that. So what we need to do is that we need to make it more conditional.
Yeah.
But if we make it more conditional, then it's really specifically tied to a single archetype, which with stratagems, which are supposed to be kind of wide, doesn't work all that much. So you look at like the faction-specific stratagems that are played, stuff like Mask of Ouroboros. I forgot the name of the Square one. The saber.
Yeah, I don't remember the name, but I remember the effect.
Like Mask of Ouroboros, you're super happy to run because you're getting 4 points and a disc and like a thinning, which by itself usually is worth it. But then on top of it, you might include the discard package, and then it's just amazing.
Yeah.
The saber
is the name.
Yeah. So you're obviously happy to include it if you're running elf. If you're running dwarf, not really, right?
Yeah, no.
And so like I don't remember what patch exactly it was, but there was this patch where we looked back on them, right, and we tried to do a bunch of buffing. That's when Mask of Ouroboros became good. I remember we changed like Basilisk Venom to be able to target something, and we were like super scared that it might become super broken, and no one played it. There was the Death Wish one, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, basically, we've explored stratagems. We aren't really sure we can bring much more depth to the game through the mean of stratagems. So part of me kind of wish there was an answer and be like, oh, it would be cool if there were no new stratagems. But at the moment, we're just focusing on other things.
Yeah. Have you ever played a card game called Duel Masters? Question from chat.
Yeah. That's the card game from Wizards of the Coast, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So I remember seeing the anime on television as a kid and being like, "Oh, that's so rad! I want to play that."
Yeah.
And I actually have a few cards. I never played an actual game of Duel Master, which I'm quite sad about because I think it has some very interesting stuff. Like, to me, it's really a good, like, obviously I don't know exactly how it works out in actual gameplay, but the idea that any card can be a source of mana for you instead of having the old Magic problem of like, ooh, I drew all my lands,
or I don't have any
no lands. It's like, I think the only reason why people still play Magic is because it's just the OG, right? It's the original one.
Yeah.
But if you were to come out with like the exact same game design nowadays, people would be like, what is this shit? Like, half of the time I don't play. What's the point?
Yeah.
So it felt like a very good answer to that problem. Sadly, I don't know much more about the game.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting question, because it's a card game that I also remember, but it's one I also didn't have like the possibility to play, and I don't know, it didn't stay as popular as MTG, for example, that which is kind of called the grandfather of card games, of CCGs, right? Because it's still around and still developing. So yeah, that makes total sense.
It's pretty amazing.
I don't know if you saw, there was a thread on Reddit about buffing overall dragons in Gwent. How do you feel about buffing all the dragons? There are a couple people who are petitioning for this, like also streamers like Miss Lady J that wants dragons to be better. What's your
the problem is what we can achieve with them, because there's what, like 7 dragon cards,
something like that
in Gwent. You cannot achieve anything with 7 cards.
Yeah.
I mean, you at best you can make a package, but then the next problem is, what are they about?
Yeah.
And then you look at like these 7 cards, and all of them, they're all over the place in terms of design. So if we wanted to like streamline the dragons to be better, it would be a lot of work. Like, this is actually a big problem for a bunch of non-existent archetypes in factions, where like, I don't know, let's take Beast in Skellige. So you have Beast kind of all over the place. You have like this one card that boosts self if it's that boosts the unit if it's a beast, or unless it gives it vitality. So it's like, oh, okay, so maybe this is a beast archetype, right? But then you look at the actual cards, and everything's a bit disconnected. Yeah. So you're like, okay, I want to make the beast archetype. What do you make it about?
Yeah. Plus, it's only, like you said, it's like 6 or 7 cards. You can't really do much with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they could be cards by themselves, which are powerful, but they would not be, like part of an archetype. Maybe if Villain Treadmirth was a little bit better, that would make me happy, because I used to play him in like a control shell when he was pretty much, an additional Scourge. So yeah, that kind of makes sense, but it's kind of like, it's a neutral utility kind of tool. It's not something that you build a archetype around, right?
And to be clear, it doesn't mean that it's never going to happen. That, like, it just means it's that much harder. And, well, since we only have a finite amount of time, it can be quite hard to just say, okay, let's rework this archetype that has absolutely no identity, and we need to start from scratch to get it somewhere.
Yeah. Totally agreed. Okay, man. We're past 1 hour, so I think we'll be slowly ending this one. That flew by so quick, man. You can talk for days about balance. And I thought that, this is going to last like 30 minutes, because we had like 7 questions, but there was like 7 more or even more from Twitch chat. So thank you everybody for watching and for asking your questions. Jean, thank you for taking the time. You've been a busy man this week. Like I said, we already recorded something this week, plus your article was published, plus I think you were on the Great Dandelion show. Man, it's been a bit busy week for you. Plus you're on Twig also.
I'm not sure it's for the good reasons that I was on the show. Though the scene was absolutely hilarious.
Yes, any publication is good publication. Like, getting your face out there in the world is important. Cool. Awesome stuff, Jean. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for your questions. We'll be back with Twig, of course, next week. Easy. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, everyone.
Bye-bye.